Hey there friends, it's Jack Taylor and this is 5 ways to supercharge your metal drums. Trying to achieve a fat and punchy drum sound is always hard to nail in the mix, especially when mixing modern metalcore. However, it does require a lot of EQ work, hard compression, and good phase alignment. And there is a lot more to it than just mixing modern metal drums. And while this isn't the full drum mix video, with these 5 ways that I'm going to show you, you'll know how to do this for your own drum mixes. Now, before we get started, if you found this video very resourceful and it helps you, give it a thumbs up, share it to a friend, comment below for your thoughts or any questions that you want to ask regarding to this, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this in the future. Also, if you're feeling generous and you want to support my music career, I have a Patreon page where you can become a member from just £3 a month and get instant access to my .wav files, Guitar Pro tabs, mix stems, and raw multi-tracks if you want to have a go at mixing them yourself. I'd like to give a massive shout out to my Patreon members shown up onto the screen. Thank you guys so much for your unconditional support, and with all that said, let's move on. Okay, so here we have my project file right here on the screen. It's actually a fall track that I did a few months ago called First Attempt at Fall. And if you haven't seen that video, go check it out. I'll put a link in the description below. And that has reached out to a lot more people. So thank you guys so much for finding this video in your feed or wherever you found that. So we'll quickly have a listen to this and then we'll go through the 5 steps of what we could do to supercharge our drums. So yeah, very punchy and fat. So step number 1 is sample layering. And the reason we do sample layering is to create our own unique sound, especially for drums. And we could do it with either 2 tracks, 3 tracks, 5 tracks, or even up to 10 tracks if you wish it to be. Because the only pro you have is that you have a lot more options to work with and you have better control of what sound that you're trying to actually look for, even if it's just EQing it to death. But the con that you go through is phasing issues. And that is the most common thing that you have with recording drums or even trying to blend drum samples together. So you're going to have to do a lot of phase alignment work, even for that, or just flipping the phase, or maybe having to EQ it to death if you need to. We'll take the kick drum for example. We have 3 kick samples. We have kick out, kick in, and kick trigger, and they're both completely different. So as you can tell, you know, I was blending between samples, and let's hear how it sounds together. So yeah, it's quite a meaty kick that you can hear. And then we'll dive into the kick out, which is for slap, I believe. Yeah. So yeah, it's quite a clicky a kick drum that I have here. So what I've done is I've EQ'd some of the low end out and shelved it a bit high. And then there's more EQ work, there's not very much going on here. It's just removing some honkiness and removing some boxiness around. And so that's what the kick sounds like. And I believe this is, let's see, I think it's Get Good Invasion. Yeah, it's Get Good Invasion. So that's the drums I've been using for it. And then we got kick in right here. This is from the Get Good Invasion drums with the kick in, but I put the trigger software on it just so I could replace the kick for a kick sample called Slam a Ding Dong from the George Lever sample pack off of Drumforge. I basically just done some EQ work here, just removing boxiness and taking out some high end, and this is what it sounds like. So there's that, and then the other one we got the kick trigger. I've also put a trigger software on it as well using the Vortex kick. That's actually off the Vortex drum kit that is free to download online. I like how it sounds and I basically use it for just to get a bit of bite out of it really. First of all, we'll see the EQ. So this is the EQ work that I've done here, basically removing some mud, honkiness, and some boxiness, all that stuff that you hear. So yeah, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, basically that's the good thing about sample layering, is that you can just like I say, create your own unique sound, but make sure you go through and check for phasing issues so that it doesn't really, the frequencies don't clash into each other. We now move on to number 2, distortion and saturation. The reason we use distortion saturation is to beefen up the drums. So I would use something like Saturn II by FabFilter, JST Heat, or the Decapitator by Soundtoys. But for kick especially, I've actually used Saturn, and it's quite an easy plugin to use. I don't know why this is toggled off, but yeah. So I use Saturn II just to beefen up the kick, using the warm tape, fully mix, no feedback. I don't really bother with the bands or anything like that, or the dynamics. But I put the band drive up to about 32% and then removing some sibilance from it because I didn't want the kick to be clicky or anything like that. So we'll hear the before and after. So yeah, it makes a slight little difference, but if you put up to 100%, then you can notice a really massive difference. So yeah, pretty good plugin to use on drums like this if you want to give it a bit more meat. You can also use JST Heat, like I say, or any saturator plugin that you can use to get the desirable result. Number 3 is transient shaping. We would use a transient shaper to enhance the attack, but also enhance the decay, which is the sustain. Mainly for a snare drum. The snare drum is like the most important part of your drums because you want your snare drum to sound very dominant in the mix with a bit more low end power and just give it some more meat with it. So if we bring this up here, this is what I'm using to enhance the attack and the sustain on the drums, called Transient Master by Native Instruments. You can also use others like SPL Transient Designer or any transient plugin that's out there. Maybe JST Transify might be an ideal option for you, considering that you have a 4 band on it. But for this one, I just find it more easier to use. The attack is basically just focusing on the low end of that snare around the 200 Hertz range, as well as just increasing the sustain on it, which controls the amount of decay, which you either stretch it out or you kind of reduce it, which acts like a gate in a way. And I will show you. So if we set them all to 0, play around with it for a little bit so that you guys can see how transparent I'm being with this, and yeah, let you guys get the experience out of it. So 100%. So yeah, as you can tell, you make it sound very thin if you pull this back a lot. So I tend to put it on 25 because I feel like it's enough for it. And then we got the sustain. And as you can tell, it acts like a gate. So yeah, you know, there's a lot of fiddling around for what kind of sound that you really want, but 50% is the most that I ever like to set it to. Now I do want to say, when using a transient shaper, try not to go overkill with the attack, because you don't want the drums to sound too pokey for the listener's ears, because even though, you know, it enhances the attack and it's going to make your drums sound a bit more dominant, but you don't want the drums to sound too pokey in the mix. So number 4 is parallel drum compression. So we use parallel drum compression to blend the actual drum mix with the heavily compressed signal of the drums itself. And you would do this by creating a bus send for the drums. So you would have a parallel drum bus from the drums into this parallel drum bus that you can actually compress the signal, and you can blend in between the two so that you kind of just get a bit more character. And that's what it's basically doing. You're adding a bit more character to the drums to make it sound a bit massive. So as you can see here, I have a parallel drum bus right here, but I split that into 3. I have one for sustain, attack, and distortion. And that is a trick that I've learned from Buster Oldham, who basically allowed himself to have a bit more options to what he is working with. So here is what the parallel drum bus sounds like. This is only for kick, snare, and toms, but not on the cymbals, because this is more transient focused. So yeah, and here on the sustain, there's not very much, but I'm basically using like a FET compressor. So let's hear how it's performing. So yeah, lots of compression on here with a ratio of 8. Slow attack, fast release, and that's basically all I'm doing. So I'm kind of just getting a bit more splash from it. Like it's not too attacky or anything like that. And then we got the attack. We have Saturn 2 with 40% on there. I'm heavily compressing this as well. I don't think I am, but okay. So I'm not heavily compressing it, but it's got a 6:1 ratio of the input. Slow attack, a bit of fast release here. It's then put into the equalizer here with just -1.88, reducing a bit of low end as it was a bit too much. It was a bit too much low end for that, as you can see here. So yeah, it was kind of just poking out a little bit, so I've reduced that. And then the next one, we got the distortion channel, which this is what it sounds like. And behind that, basically removing some low ends before it hits the saturator. Okay, and then we've got Saturn 2 with 100% all the way. Nothing else is being touched. And then it's then through this EQ band, which Buster Oldham actually did. He kind of made it like a cab synth in such way, just because there's distortion behind it. And this is without. So yeah, basically removing some low end and the high end. So yeah, and that's basically it. So this is something that you can do to add some more character to your drums. And lastly, number 5 is sidechaining. Sidechaining is when a piece of sound is controlling another sound's level of volume, and from there you would use something like a compressor if you're something like an EDM artist making EDM music, which you're kind of just sidechaining the kick over the bass or everything else to make it sound as the kick is pumping the music. But for this one, in terms of sidechaining, yes, we're going to be sidechaining the kick over the bass and also the guitars using a multi-band compressor. And this is what I believe that some people don't know how to do. So how do you sidechain a kick over the bass and guitars? Now, this is a fairly simple process. So all you're going to need, obviously, you're going to need a multi-band compressor. So you could use something like Pro MB, which is what I'm using to sidechain the kick over to that, and as well as the guitars. You drag this by routing the kick, yeah, this one, I mean. So you would click on it and then drag it over to the bass, but putting it in the Pro MB channel. So let's have a look at the root settings on here. So this one, we got the routing of the kick. So if you're sidechaining the kick over the bass, you have the input on onto what's that? Mono 1 and Mono 2, which is the left and right channel. And for the Pro MB, you have it on 3 and 4. You can, from there, activate the sidechain. So basically, the reason for sidechaining the kick over the bass is so that I can allow the kick to cut through into the mix over the bass so that it sounds more punchy, because without sidechaining, the kick and the bass frequencies are going to clash into each other and it's not going to sound very punchy. So that has to be put in so that it can cut through in the low end range. I'll let you see the setting right here of how I do it. So I'm basically compressing the sound. I'm not expanding it, I'm compressing it. So the threshold is at just near enough -18 dB of compression. With the range all the way to -30, fast attack, a bit of fast release, the output's not been messed with. I put it on 3 band, and this is on external because we're obviously routing the kick over the bass and it's not internal. Take a look at what this is actually doing. You might not hear a massive difference, but if I show you on the guitars, then you'll see that it actually makes a massive difference. But yeah, as you can see, as the kick is being played, the sidechain then triggers so that the bass drum can actually just fit through into the mix. Okay, so I put the drum mix back into the instrument bus mix along with the guitars. So we'll have a look at the Pro MB on the guitars. So yeah, same setting, you're compressing it. The threshold's at -13.69. Same range, same attack, same release, same everything. The external is the same. The 3 band is the same. So yeah, it's basically just doing the same job as it is on the bass guitars too. And I will show you something funny. If you want to slam the guitars a lot more and sound like No Oath, where the mix is being slammed by the kick, then you can do this. Be my guest. But here it is. Let's do that. There you have it. Sidechaining works very well like that if you want to try and get your kick to sound more fuddy through the mix, just to cut through from the bass and the guitars in the low end range. That massively helps with your mixes a lot, so try this out. So coming to a conclusion, we looked at 5 ways of supercharging your drums, and it's not something that everybody does to their mixes, as you know, they have different approaches to what they actually want to do with their music. And I cannot stress that trying to mix drums is one of the hardest things to do in modern metal music. Now, believe it or not, I have been one of these people that have made amateur mixes in the past from like 4 or 5 years, maybe even 6 years ago. I wish I could show you guys my amateur mixes if I can find them on my drive, and I've went through a lot of mistakes. But nevertheless, you know, don't be afraid to give something a bit more than it needs, because the whole point of mixing drums, if you're doing modern metalcore, you have to get them to sound fat and punchy in the mix. So give it lots of compression, you'll check for phasing issues, and just add a lot more beef with just saturation. And yeah, don't forget to do a lot of EQ work if you need it to, just to remove boxiness, any sibilants, or just too much low-end information. Now, phase cancellation is like the most common issue that people ever go through when they're recording drums or they're trying to blend samples together, and the consideration for phase cancellations is often forgotten. I've not got much else to say, but if you found this video resourceful, you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, share it to a friend who's struggling to mix drums, comment below your thoughts or any questions regarding to this video, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this in the future. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys later in the next video. Take care.